The world looked very small when you walked among the clouds. Too small for her taste. All of the interesting parts were hidden behind a sweeping panorama of mountains and rivers. It was pretty to look at first, but quickly grew boring. The woman who had chosen this meeting place was more than pretty, and never boring. Or never had been, at least. Balthamor watched her carefully from her place at the edge of the gathering, and wondered if Lanfear's goals could truly be as simple as wanting to seduce her old boyfriend's reincarnation. The woman in question, tall, dark-haired, stunningly beautiful and clad all in white, lounged in an intricately carved chair large enough to be considered a throne with her owl-like seanchan Odiva perched on her shoulder. From her arrogant demeanor, you would think it a gift that she had deigned to provide chairs for the rest of the chosen, though, of course, they could simply have made their own if she had not. A full dozen such thrones were arrayed in their cloudy meeting place now, but Balthamel could not help but notice that the chairs formed a teardrop, not a circle, and Lanfear had placed herself at the point of that teardrop, with no one to her left or right, and she had not troubled to rise to greet any of her guests when they arrived. She did not rise for Ketvarkade either when he appeared in their midst. He was a handsome man, and his long hair was a pale blue that never appeared in nature. Like Balthamel, he had benefited from technologies that no longer existed. Ketvarkade's face remained expressionless as he surveyed his surroundings. That his feet rested on nothing more than water vapor gave him no concern. "Am I the last to arrive, then?" he asked in his usual disinterested tone. "Not at all," said Lanfear with a smile. "We're still waiting for our glorious leader and his lapdog. Oh, and Moiraine, if she ever works up the courage to show herself." The new arrival studied Lanfear carefully. "Ishamael is indisposed. I doubt he will be joining us this evening. Indelin watches over him tirelessly, as I'm sure you can imagine." Lanfear's laughter was richly musical, even in its mockery. "Oh, I'm sure. Why, if not for brave Indelin, the vaunted Heart of the Dark might still be lying comatose on the streets of Falme, where Luz Therin left him." "Quite," Ketvarkade said coldly. He had been an ally of Ishamael's for years, insomuch that any of them had allies at least. Whether that alliance survived the end of their age and being awoken in this new one remained to be seen. Ketvarkade moved to one of the unclaimed seats and adjusted his robes before settling in. He had been one of the 7 chosen most recently freed from the boar, and had not yet adapted to this strange new world. He still dressed as an Aes Sedai of old would have, in robes of multiple layers, primarily of dark purple in his case. Balthamel herself was adjusting quickly. She had explored quite a bit of the new world now, and though it was horribly backwards, it had a certain charm to it. After some consideration, she decided to adopt the fashion of the Damani women. Their dresses flattered her lush form, and the red silk her current garb was made from suited her dark coloring. She smoothed the dress across her hips as she sauntered over to rejoin the gathering. The Chosen's numbers had doubled in the half year since she returned to the world outside the Great Lord's prison. She shuddered. Her mind shied away from remembering the void, the emptiness to which she had been banished by Luz Therin for so many centuries. They had slept a dreamless sleep. There had been that much mercy in their fates, but even in that sleep some part of her had known she was lost. Ishamael had escaped that fate. So far as she knew, he was the only one of the Chosen who had not been bound in Sheol Gul to have survived the breaking of the world. But the passage of millennia seemed to have driven him quite mad if he had not been mad before. Along with Agenor, Indelin, and Moiraine, Balthamel had been the first of the Chosen to emerge from their prison. She had not been fool enough to hope for allies among that group, of course. Agenor hadn't been seen since failing to secure the Eye of the World. Indelin was Ishamael's creature to the bone, and Moiraine was a notorious coward. Lanfear and Asmodean had been next, as strange a pairing as they were. Lanfear was too erratic to be relied on, but for all his weakness, Asmodean might see the sense of her plan. It affected his own survival after all, and what else mattered to that one? The 7 more recent arrivals, though, they were much more promising. "There is no point waiting on Moiraine," she said as she took her seat among them. Of the 13 chairs there, only 3 lacked claimants now. "And Agenor?" asked Asmodean. "Dead, if he is lucky. Wishing for death if not," Lanfear said dismissively. Poor Agenor, who thought himself so smart. "And poor Ishi," Balthamel sighed as she plopped down on her chair. He just wanted this new dragon to be his friend, but the boy went and stabbed him right in the chest. That's what love will get you. She didn't look at Lanfear, but she could feel her glare even so. It brought a smirk to Balthamel's lips. "That's what stupidity gets you more like," growled Samael. A compact man of average height, his hair and beard were a bright golden hue, and his blue eyes were angry. That last was a near constant with him. It went well with the livid red scar that slanted across his face. The richly embroidered red coat he had taken to wearing only made his scar more noticeable. He should have killed this boy, this old Thor, this so-called dragon reborn, the moment he laid eyes on him. Balthamel smiled to herself. Finally someone else was seeing sense. Lanfear's languid mockery evaporated like morning mist. She sat up straight in her chair. Ishamael is nynaeve bliss. His orders were and are the will of the great Lord of the Dark. They must be respected. Grandal tittered. Like Ketvarkad, she had not yet put off the fashions of old. The golden-haired woman wore the same straith gown she had been wearing when the boar was sealed behind them, its colors shifting with her mood. It turned a rosy hue as she leaned forwards in her chair, her big blue eyes alight with mischief. So much has changed in the world. Have you changed too, Lanfear? Where does this new loyalty come from? Could it be that Ishamael has diddled you silly and you've turned your obsession towards him? Or do we still sing the same old song? The near-opaque fabric did little to hide Grendal's plump curves, or the golden ornaments arrayed on a chain about her neck that formed her Valda High. Unlike most of them, hers was almost complete. The War of the Powers had left Balthamel with only a few pieces of her own set. She eyed Grendal's collection hungrily, even as she put herself on the verge of fleeing the meeting. Lanfear was not a woman to be challenged so blatantly. Her reactions were not always rational, and Balthamel had no intention of being nearby if the 2 women tried to kill each other. Lanfear bared her teeth in what was not a smile. "You know your orders, Grendal. Defy them at your peril." "Orders," said Belal musingly. He had put off the robes in favor of a simple coat and breeches. "We have slept for 3,000 years while Ishamael wandered this world alone. The great Lord's voice can no longer reach us even now that the seal has begun to crumble. What can Ishamael know of our master's orders? Precious little, I would say. And Ishamael's orders alone mean nothing to me." Many of the others nodded at the white-haired man's words, Samael with firm resolve, Asmodean hastily and only after checking to see the others' reactions first. Lanfear's face was a still mask, but her dark eyes were madly intent. She had to know where this was going now. Balthamel wondered if she would try to stop it. She was strong in the power, the strongest woman in recorded history, in fact, but even she could not hope to defeat them all. Not even if Ketbarkadis sided with her. Ravin stretched out his long legs and steepled his fingers. The ostentatious lace he had taken to wearing suited him well, and he had the physicality to wear it while still looking masculine. The boy could be no threat to us now, naturally, but it would be best to be rid of him before he can grow into his power. Dark of hair and skin and eye, he was a powerfully built and very handsome man. She might have considered him attractive if she didn't know him as well as she did. His Sisan Odaiva took the form of a tiny naked woman, and even here she danced silently in mid-air for his amusement. Balthamel had ordered her own Buki to privacy mode. She wanted no distractions right now. "Is he handsome?" asked Grendal. "Luz Theron was handsome once, before the war aged him. I might consider keeping him as a pet if he is handsome." Balthamel concentrated, focusing her mind and her will. An image appeared in the center of their gathering, an image of a tall young man with red hair and blue-gray eyes. No more than 18, with broad shoulders and a flat stomach, he was handsomer than most of those Grendal had kept in her earlier harems. She watched the other woman intently as she summoned the image, but Grendal's ditzy smile never changed. Not that Balthamel was fool enough not to see through that, of course. For all the lust-fueled orgy she had indulged in, Grendal was a psychiatrist of renown, and as intelligent and manipulative as they came. It was him, Grand Old Thor. The Dragon Reborn, Balthamel said, studiously avoiding Lanfear's glare. Samael snorted. A pup. There will be little satisfaction in killing such, but it will do. The true Luz Therin has been lucky enough to escape my vengeance, it seems. Lanfear matched his disdainful sound with one of her own. Escaped? Said Ketvakade. I can't recall a single battle between you in which it was Luz Therin who did the running. The scar-faced man sneered at him. Do you forget that Choedan Kal? I denied him their use when I took Philistia and killed Roland Vox Rance. Roland Vox, yes. Not Luz Therin, Kedbarcade sighed. Enough quibbling, said Bilal, irritation accentuating the creases on his brow. We all know what has to be done here. The only question is how to do it. Where is this old Thor now? Balthamel brushed her hair back from her eyes and made her voice as casual as she could. My spies say he is still in the place called Falmerden, trapped on the peninsula by a legion of enemies and the terrain itself. It shouldn't be hard to find him. She hoped one of them would take up the task. As twisted as he was, Ravin was right about what needed to be done here, but Balthamel had no intention of being the one to explain to Ishamael what had happened. Assuming the man ever recovered from his injuries, and if the Great Lord truly did share Ishamael's desires. No. Better by far if one of the others took care of the problem. Have you memorized the new map? Show it to me, commanded Belal, just as if she was one of his secretaries. Balthamel narrowed her eyes. Are you having such a hard time learning the common tongue that you can't find time to study the land we hover above? And you call yourself a general? Asha Belenar gave a small shake of her head. She waved her hand and Balthamel's image of Ulthor shimmered into nothingness, replaced by a rectangular table on the surface of which was carved a detailed, three-dimensional map of the continent now called Valgarda. A very detailed map. In fact, given how recently she had been woken, the nations and their capitals were all marked with small, colorful flags. Here is your map. Study it carefully, she said in her rich voice. Asha Belenar was the oldest woman among the chosen save Hessalam, but while age had turned her long hair to snow and framed her mouth with deep furrows, it had not bent her back or dulled her wits in the slightest. She rose from her chair and went to stand over the map, clad in a wine-red dress that suited her well. She studied the others shrewdly as one by one they came to join her. Falmerton is there, on Tommen Head, put in Asmodean helpfully. Samael sneered at him. Nile, sneered at him. Yes, it is, Asha Belenar said patiently. What forces do we have there? Balthamel shrugged. Hidden agents of the usual sort? Athan Shadar, who do not admit their allegiance openly. A well-placed assassin should be enough to deal with an untrained child, said Hessalam, though her attention seemed to be elsewhere. She had not been beautiful even when she was young, and youth had already fled her long before she turned to the shadow. Immortality was theirs, but that had not been enough to turn back time. Hessalam didn't care about such things, though. She wore a plain, brown, hooded robe and a look of careful calculation. Her grey eyes seemed even colder when contrasted with her dark, heavily lined skin. An army would be better, Bilal groused. Balthamel smiled. Then you are in luck. Several of the Myrddraal are on their way there now, using the ways. Do you know of those yet? They are a curious pocket dimension that was tamed for the Ogier's use sometime after our imprisonment. The people here use them to travel quickly, since none of them know how to actually travel. Her smile faltered. Incidentally, that is something you should all be careful about using. You never know when a local who has the talent for reading residues might chance by. Bilal grunted. That would be prudent. We should not squander such an advantage. Not that we are likely to need advantages over savages like these. He stood at what would have been the southeastern corner of the map, if a compass had any meaning in this place. He and most of the rest of the Chosen were eyeing the little flags with interest, in between narrow-eyed glances at each other. What was that about the Myrddraal? Lanfear demanded. Why would they be going to Falmedon? Balthamel laughed. That's the funny part. After Bar-Alsamon got himself skewered, the Myrddraal got it into their heads to go avenge him. All in the name of the great Lord of the Dark, and his champion, of course. They've taken an army of Trollocs through the ways to seek out the man who dared wound their precious leader, and see that he dies screaming. Her laughter intensified. I almost hope Ishmael does in fact recover from his wound. The look on his face when he hears that heart-warming tale of loyalty would be worth it. Asha Belanar did not smile. Vexing for Ishmael. Convenient for us. One of you should go with the army to ensure its success. Meanwhile, there is the matter of these nations. MBM Mera. I think I might take this tear for myself. Bilal's back stiffened. No, I have my eye on that already. Your eye. And your eye concerns me. Why, exactly? Asha Belanar said quietly. Because you are not a complete fool, said Belal in a cold whisper. The two locked eyes over the map. Ravin chuckled. His Sisan Odaiba had winked out when he rose from his seat, leaving only Lanfear's on display mode. You've explored these lands, Balthamel. Which of these queens is the most beautiful? Do you include the borderlands in that? She asked. A few of the royals there had been quite eye-catching. He gave an easy shrug. Those are the ones that spend their lives fighting Trollocs, I thought. Taking one of them as my kingdom sounds a bit too much like work. Let the others trouble themselves with the borderlands when they finally wake. The more southerly lands will suit me. Well, most of them are ruled by old women. But Morghese of Andor is said to be a great beauty. Ravin smiled lasciviously. Interesting, Lanfear sneered. Kingdoms, Cleans. Is that all you can think about? Is that the extent of your ambition? Ravin's eyes on her were hot with anger, and more than anger. Balthamel knew he would have raped Lanfear then and there if he thought he could. But Ravin knew when to indulge his lusts and when to bide his time. You won't want one for yourself then, he said tightly. Good, good. Perhaps we'll be generous and leave you something. This little one down in the corner, say. Moiraine, is it? Looks worthless. You can have it. I can have anything I want, said Lanfear dangerously. Hesselum paid not a whit of attention to the storm brewing in their midst. She stood at the western coast of Valgada, crease-faced and hooded, looking down on it sinisterly like a stylized image of a goddess from one of the pantheons their ancestors had believed in ages upon ages ago. Valrais. It is closely allied with the so-called Aes Sedai of Tar Valon. According to what I've read, rich and powerful. I stray too. Is it all that Ishmael's library claimed? One of the strongest, Balthamel said, short of Tar Valon itself and Andor. Hesselum eyed Ravin for a moment, then turned her attention back to the map. Valrais is mine. Intrude on it at your peril, she announced with finality. Samael snorted. As usual, you overestimate your strength. Balthamel said nothing, but privately she thought that it was less that Hesselum overestimated her strength, and more that Samael underestimated her cunning. Grandau tittered. That dress you are wearing is domani, isn't it, Balthamo? It suits you well. I think I'll take Arad Doman as my seat then, since we are dividing things up so nicely. Balthamel did no more than smile in response. She wouldn't have thought Grendal would have had time to familiarize herself with modern fashions of all things, not with everything else she had to learn. It was worth remembering that the woman was not as foolish as she appeared. Samael's anger grew. I agreed to none of this. I will have my own pick of kingdoms. This one. He stabbed a finger down on the land with a tall mountain range at its eastern border and a fast-flowing river on its west. A defensible-looking place from their high vantage. That is Carien, Balthamo said. It is currently in the middle of a civil war. It should be easy enough to take over. Just pick a side and destroy the others. Samael's face soured. Broken, weak, and useless, he muttered. I won't have such a mess fobbed off on me. This one, then. Alien. It will do. He planted his fists on the table and loomed truculently over the southern half of the continent, finally looking as tall as he had always wanted to be. Balthamo was starting to grow alarmed. It wasn't that she wanted a nation of her own to rule. She'd taken charge of her share of territory for the Shadow during the War of the Powers and had found little joy in it. It was boring work, and not meeting the expectations of their master had often had dire consequences. A great many chosen had died in the war, and not all of them at the hands of their enemies. No, she preferred to work in the shadows. Her concern came from something else. Ilian will be waiting for you after you are finished with Arthur, she said appeasingly. I'm sure we can reach an agreement on that. Someone had to go to Falmeden and kill Althor. She had thought Samael the most likely candidate. He had hated Luz Therin with a passion. It had been the dragon who gave him his scar, and he had sworn to wear it until the day he gave Luz Therin a matching one. But if even he was busy claiming a nation for himself, Ashar Belanar was leaning over the table and frowning. Alien. Southern coastal lands like that promise a pleasant climate. This Oltara barely qualifies as a nation from what I've read. It's just a collection of squabbling towns, most of which are too small to even be considered city-states. The other two look much more appealing. Ilian is mine, growled Samael. Ashur Belanar fixed him with a cold stare, much as she had Belal, who now stood over his prize as though protecting it from scavengers, but the scar-faced man did not back down either. Ashur Belanar gave an annoyed harumph. It matters not. Oltera will do, for now. Samael smiled tightly, looking as though he had won a great victory. I suppose I'll take Amadisia then, sighed Ketvarkad. He looked down on the continent with a slight smile on his lips. There was no echo of that smile in his dark, slanted eyes. It is the one ruled by these fanatics who call themselves the Children of the Light, unless I misremember. That should be amusing. And all Thor, Balthamel said tightly. Ravin waved a dismissive hand. Let the Murdral deal with him. If they fail, we can take a hand. But I doubt we will need to trouble ourselves. Lanfear had watched the argument in silence, but Balthamel could not fail to notice the relief in her eyes. She noticed the disgruntled look Asmodean wore as well. Maybe I could persuade him to do it, she thought sourly. Asmodean was a weakling, but should still be stronger than any channeler in this age, especially an untrained one like Ulthor. Wajad, Drovja, Samael or Belal should be taking care of this. Both men styled themselves as warriors, both hated Luz Therin, and yet neither would go and kill his reincarnation. Balthamel's fists were white-knuckled at her sides. There is also the matter of the traitor who absconded with the Horn of Valer, Lanfear said, visibly glad to steer the conversation elsewhere. And towards what was another sore point for Balthamel. Ishamael had insisted she hand the horn over to the traitor in question, an ugly little weasel named Padan Fan, after she removed it from the vault in Faldara. It would have been much easier to simply bring it with her, but no, The great philosopher decreed that getting all Thor to chase after it was somehow more important. And so Ishmael had managed to plot his way into being skewered and left comatose while the horn was lost to the dragon reborn. Idiot. Samael had a much more direct style of command. Kill him. Kill him. Obviously. The look Lanfear gave him was not respectful. That goes without saying. Who and how are the questions? Obviously. You need not concern yourselves with that, Ketvarkade said. Indilin tells me the orders have already been given and the hunters sent forth. Lanfear nodded to herself in satisfaction. Balar was stroking his close-cropped white beard thoughtfully as he frowned down at the map. The color contrasted nicely with his darkly tanned skin, but she was much too irritated to appreciate that. He studied Tyr on the map, as though ruling a backwards nation was more important than killing the youthful reincarnation of their most implacable foe. I propose an agreement not to move against any other chosen until all other threats have been dealt with, Balar said in the voice of a trained orator. That they would try to kill each other eventually was a fact he did not bother to try and deny. The rest were as unsurprised by that as Balthamel herself was. There is plenty of killing to be done. Al Thor and all those associated with him, Tar Valon, these borderlands. And those just the ones I know of. Settling our differences can wait. Should any break the proposed alliance, all others will be obliged to band together to see the aggressor pays for their betrayal with his or her life. What say you? The proposal was a good one, and they all stood to benefit from it. One by one, the others voiced their approval, Asmodean included. He had not dared try to claim a nation for himself. No doubt he knew that he would be the first that the other chosen moved against if he had. Would he dare go against Ishmael's wishes? She doubted it. Balthamel added her voice to the chorus, though she was unable to keep it from reflecting her sour mood. Lanfear was the last to speak, and when she did, it was with such snappish force that Balthamel suspected she had wanted to refuse. But even she had to realize how foolhardy that would be. Good, said Balar. His gaze slid back to the nation he had been so eager to claim. I am sure this agreement would profit us all handsomely. Ajah Belenar sent him a cold look, and her small smile promised retribution. Those two had sparred many times before, with words and more than words. Balthamel suspected they would spar again soon enough. Ravin yawned theatrically. As amusing as this has been, I have business to attend to elsewhere. If there is nothing else of import, shall we depart? None objected. Lanfear sought Balthamel out before the gathering could disperse. She drew her aside from the others in that high, cloud-cloaked place and lowered her voice to a cold whisper. Hear me well, Evai Raman, she said, using her original name as few would dare. Lutherin is mine. If you kill him, I will see that you die screaming. The chill that crawled across Balthamel's skin was not caused by her words alone, or even the obsessive intensity in the woman's ebon eyes. I hear you, she answered, quietly and carefully, heart racing with the imminence of battle. She knew Lanfear far too well not to know how serious the woman was. Still, there were other agents besides the Myrddraal who might be inspired to rid them of all Thor before it was too late. She would just have to be certain to pick ones who could not possibly be traced back to her.